This family thought they had gone delusional, but wound up inviting a demonic entity into their own child's life instead. With all the horrific happenings around their home, death was nearby. Grab your snacks. A couple named Deborah and Tony got married in 1992, expecting their first child, and while searching for their forever home, found a 100-year-old property of a house, signed the deal, and started decorating immediately one of the three upstairs bedrooms to become a cute little nursery for their soon-to-be boy. Taylor was born just a couple of months later, and one day, while all three of them were coming home from a day out and about to put him into bed, Deborah, she noticed something strange, a situation upstairs that made her feel like something was in their home while they were gone. When they walked into the nursery, she saw all of the baby's stuffed animals on the floor, arranged in a pile very neatly, instead of where she'd usually put them up on a chair, which would lean against the wall in the room. So, with Taylor still in Deborah's arms, Tony ran back downstairs, opening every door, checking every room, but ended up finding no one. And in passing off the strange moment, Deborah just picked up the toys and put them back on the chair where they should be, and they both made their way back downstairs together. But this time, the family dog, that was usually very calm, very well behaved in general, started barking and aggressively growling while looking up at the nursery door. And while they were looking at the dog, and the dog was looking up, and their eyes met the nursery door, wondering why this dog was out of control, in that moment, they saw the nursery light flicker back on by itself. So Tony ran back upstairs, re-entered the room, only to find one of the stuffed animals, a teddy bear, sitting in the exact same spot on the floor. He picked it up, observing the room, and once he saw nothing was wrong, he put it in the exact same chair, and left the room, went back downstairs with Deborah. But as they were turning around the corner to another room, right there by their feet was that same teddy bear, this time with its back towards them. They started arguing with each other, trying to find a logical explanation because they felt crazy watching these stuffed animals teleport from area to area around the house by themselves, but eventually just convinced themselves that they were imagining things. Weird things kept happening all around the house after 5 months of them getting settled in. It was like the electrical wiring all inside the walls was faulty or something. Random days while they would be eating dinner or resting in their living room, random lights would just go out, leaving them in the darkness of the evening. Other times, the oven and its timer would randomly go on by itself, as if something had started to bake, but nothing was in it and they had never touched it. Other times, Tony and Deborah both felt a little bit of a sense of morbidity lurking around the house as they both started to smell a scent. The smell would be lingering throughout the entire home, and after trying to figure out where it might be coming from, searching every single room, they never found its source, and it kept getting worse and worse, stronger. It smelled like something was rotting for them. And after about 3 more months, Tony told his mom what they had been experiencing throughout the house, especially that Taylor's stuffed animal toys had been teleporting to random rooms. So his mom reached out to an old friend of hers who used to live at the same property. She explained to his mom that she did remember a few times where she'd gotten upset with her own kids for seemingly leaving their toys lying out around in that same room that was now the nursery. But her friend's children at the same time told her that it wasn't them that were leaving the toys out on the floor. It was Sally, a little girl that was their friend that had been visiting them every now and then. She would listen to these stories about Sally, just dismissing them, thinking that they were just talking about an imaginary friend that they'd made up and blamed it on that as a circumstance. Well, just a few days after that phone call conversation, Tony and Deborah ended up finding the same teddy bear in the same spot on that floor. This time, they called Tony's brother, Larry, to come over and be an outside voice, some extra eyes on the situation, letting them know that they weren't just going insane. Larry wasted no time when he arrived at their house and immediately called up one of his friends, a psychic from California named Barbara, who started explaining over the phone to him little bits of pieces of information that she could gather from feeling the connection of presence over the phone line and gathering information of what she could about the address. She told Larry straightforward, "Look, there is a ghost in the house. It's a little girl, 9 years old, named Sally." She further explained to Tony and Deborah that Sally was a playful, nice little girl who wanted to play with them from the afterlife. She felt like she was now part of their family. The next day, Tony's other brother, named George, came over to the house after hearing about all of these stories about a ghost, thinking it sounded totally absurd. He was a firm non-believer and thought ghosts were a total hoax. So George decided to mock the teddy bear, the same one that was known to teleport from area to area around the house. So Tony handed him the teddy bear, and George held it up to his face, asking Tony to take a picture of the two together. In that moment, Tony said, "Sally, if you're here, say cheese." And George himself saw the teddy bear looking from the direction directly at the camera, turning its head and looking directly in George's face from his peripheral. George screamed, jumped out of the chair that he was in, ran away. Tony ran upstairs, telling Deborah what had happened, and they both decided to get Taylor and leave the property in that instant. But what Tony realized when he was walking to the car to put Taylor in the back seat, well, he started feeling a sharp, searing pain on his back. Thinking he might have just pulled a muscle from the stressful situation of a haunted teddy bear, he waited until they got to Larry's house. Then he pulled up his shirt, looked in the mirror, and saw 3 deep, bloody scratch marks that resembled from his neck down to his middle back nails. A human hand scratched his back. After a few days had passed of Tony, Deborah, and Taylor staying at Larry's house, they decided it's time to go back home to see if all of these bizarre and dangerous haunted scenarios had died off. And now it was Tony only that was hearing scratching inside the walls, like someone was inside the walls trying to scratch their way out. But Deborah couldn't really hear it. It was almost like the scratching noise was only meant for Tony. And while they were home for those first few days and he was hearing things in the walls, they hadn't encountered anything physically dangerous. So they decided to invite some friends over and have a sort of housewarming dinner party as a kind of celebration for not noticing anything too major lately. Tony and Deborah, they were sitting, laughing, enjoying their time with their friends, and all of them were sitting at the dinner table as they were explaining what had been happening around the house, all of the bizarre things that they had encountered thus far. And while Tony was in the middle of explaining it to them, one of his friends cut him off mid-sentence because they started to look over and notice something that was happening to Tony at the dinner table. It was a gash of blood that was making its way across Tony's forehead. Whatever entity was taunting their family, even if it was Sally or some other kind of being, they definitely were not friendly. Already with bandages on his forehead, Tony and Deborah were trying to sleep later that night, and he was sweating, shivering, asleep, having nightmares of something pulling him out of the bed. And he woke up in a cold sweat, hyperventilating, confused, noticing, looking at his hands, that he had blisters across his wrists. The next night, and Tony ended up waking up at the exact same time. He started to glance around the room and finally noticed, looking at the foot of his bed, glancing up, a woman, an older woman there, dressed in all black, with his demise look and devious smile on her face, looking down at him. She started to reach for his neck, threatening him, saying she was going to choke him to death, and everything started to shake around him. The entire room was trembling, and finally he jumped up out of bed and she just vanished. They had sent out some word to a ghost hunting TV show, and out of desperation, he said, "You know what? Come on over. Have at it. I don't know what else to do." Within minutes of this camera crew setting up to interview him about these haunted occurrences, they all observed in that same moment yet again another scratch marking on his head. It was like a separate wound, a gash across his face. It turns out the previous owner's name was the ghost scratching Mike in the face with MC initials. Tony realized that their entire house was full of entities, not just a little 9-year-old Sally girl. He wanted to perform an exorcism on the entire house. A priest came along and started to douse the house, saying prayer after prayer, and while this was going on, Tony was following him around, but started to feel this immense sense of dread and anger sort of succumb him, wash over him, like as if something was trying to possess his body, his mind. He came to once the entire thing was over, but he realized that he actually ended up going on a rampage, but went to grab a steak knife to find a stray cat, grabbed the stray cat and started to stab it repeatedly. He butchered this cat off of the street. He still felt this sense of anger and dread. This time he could hear voices. It was Sally, the 9-year-old little girl ghost, and the woman in black. He started to hear them tell him and go and stab Deborah. He told her what was going on, explaining to her, hey, this is not gonna end well. Deborah, finally listening to him in that moment after the cleanse and everything had happened, she understood. And within 2 weeks, they packed up all their things, got Taylor, and finally they were out of that house.